Welcome to the Chapman CRE webcast, which is presented by the Hayden School of Real Estate at Chapman University. I'm your host, Steven Ames. I'm the executive director of the Hayden School. On this webcast, we sit down with leaders across the commercial real estate industry to discuss markets, investment strategy, and the ideas shaping the future of the built environment. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Malcolm Johnson, founder and CEO of Langdon Park Capital, a real estate investment firm that's focused on workforce and affordable housing. I've known Malcolm for a long time and always admired him. He's had a very extraordinary career path, from the NFL to investment banking at JP Morgan and Bank of America, and now leading a firm that's dedicated to delivering strong real estate returns, but also expanding housing opportunities in underserved communities. So, Malcolm, welcome to the Chapman CRE webcast.
Thank you for having me, Steve. And can I call you Professor or you first Steve?
I still get a kick out of that, so I love it.
Okay. Are you Doctor, Professor?
No. I'm barely a professor, so never thought I would hear somebody call me that. To be honest.
I love it. Glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Maybe start off with your personal journey. You began your career as a professional athlete in the NFL before moving into real estate. But before that, I remember, I think maybe one of the first times I met you was you had a close relationship with Lou Holtz. You played at Notre Dame, and you brought Lou in to do a special presentation for the group, and I'll never forget it. Maybe talk a little bit about, with his recent passing, what he meant to you and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so first, let me just say, you're right. We have known each other for a long time, and Steve, you look like 2006, right around when we first met, which is amazing. You must be living the right way. But the journey didn't even begin at Notre Dame. I'm originally from Northeast Washington, D.C. I went to a Jesuit high school in the city, and it was a big departure for me. My neighborhood was a bus and a subway ride away from that high school. It was my first time ever being in an environment where everybody did not look exactly like me, and it was one of the best journeys of my life. So that hour and 10-minute commute to school every day was like going into another world, but not just academically, but socially. Ultimately, I became a pretty good student athlete. I played a bunch of sports in high school, but played football and ran track in college. But the reason that I ultimately chose Notre Dame was a lot because of Lou Holtz, but also because it was an opportunity to be around people and students, especially, who were different, but also very similar values. So Notre Dame is a faith-based institution. I'm not Catholic, but Notre Dame is one of the premier Catholic institutions in the country. So that resonated a lot with me and my family, and that was one of the things that Lou Holtz really talked about when he described what it meant to be a representative university and to ultimately graduate from Notre Dame. So that sold me. And at Notre Dame, he was right. Everything that he talked about in terms of how hard it was going to be, but how good it was going to be, came true. He was the best coach I ever had, for sure. And I had a lot of different coaches, especially once I got to the pros and I bounced around in a bunch of teams. I got to see a lot of different leadership styles, but he was hard to play for, but easy to love after the yelling stopped. He was very detail-oriented, big on preparation. He focused a lot on love and integrity and building teams. So that obviously resonated with my family's values even before I got to school, but in the time afterwards, it's been a lot of how I thought about kind of living my life. So after Notre Dame, like you said, played pro football for a few years. And I do want to talk a lot about your career journey, how leaders like you have influenced what I'm trying to do now. But even while I was playing pro football, and trust me, this time 30 years ago, which is crazy. I was 18 years old. I would have said the biggest goal of my life is to go to the NFL and play there for a long time because I love the game. I love competing. I love being on a team. But I very quickly realized, after getting to college, and the NFL became a very real potential goal for me, but I realized that I wasn't put on earth just to be a football player. It was something that I did really well. I had to get better, a lot better, in order to compete and play at Notre Dame and ultimately in the league. But the goals shifted. The further I got as a football player, the more I realized I don't want my life to be defined by what I do every day as just a career. I want it to be defined by how much I'm influencing the world around me. So football was a great springboard. But again, just by 30 years have passed, and there's a lot that changes in that time frame, but the values have stayed the same, and the way I've approached achieving those things has been different. But at every step of the career, it's not been about the job specifically, and more about what impact I can have and what freedom this allows me and the people I love the most. So super blessed to be here.
That's well said. I love that. You've always struck me as someone who's had a higher mission. And when you were playing football, did you already have an interest in business, or did that come later? How did that all work out?
Not really. This is a funny story, and it's true, and I always have to give honor to my parents because I just was blessed to have a great family foundation. But at Notre Dame, you don't get to choose your major until after your freshman year. So every student spends the first year in what was then known as your first year of studies. So a bunch of general courses and a few requirements, but then you, after that first year, get to decide what your major is going to be. So I remember coming home after my freshman year in college and telling my dad that I wanted to major in elementary education. And he pretended to listen and be supportive for like the 15 or 20 minutes that I explained to him why I was choosing that major. And mostly it was because I said, one, I want to go play in the NFL. And that, again, was a very real goal. There were, a lot of upperclassmen who I had a chance to practice against that first year who were already headed to the NFL. So I'm like, if I'm good enough to play here, then I'm good enough to play in the league, and that's what I want to do. But I said, after I retire, Dad, I want to move back to a community like the one we live in, and I want to be a mentor and a teacher and a leader in this community for young people. My dad said, okay, that all sounds great, but you grew up here, and you've always been a person who's been involved in this community, but what are you going to teach if you don't have a degree in something beyond what it's like to grow up in this community? And that was his thought around what a degree in education was. And I said, okay, well, what would you suggest? And he said, well, first, I'm not suggesting. I'm going to insist that you major in business. And no matter what, you'll have something tangible to actually teach if what you are describing actually comes true. And that was the best advice / instruction / order that my dad probably ever gave me with regard to career. So I majored in business, but I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to work in finance. I just knew I wanted to work in the community, like I described. So that turned out to be a huge blessing. You notice you have kids. As a parent, you can see the chapters of the book before your child has read them. You can see maybe a better path to get to this end goal. And so I'm so grateful that my father had enough foresight to at least convince me to major in something where I get a base in accounting and finance and econ, et cetera. But I didn't know that I wanted to work in business right away.
Yeah. Well, good for him. I mean, that was good advice, but why real estate?
So again, I was very fortunate. So much of success in life just kind of is due to grace of God, fate, jumping ahead a little bit. So I ended up going to grad school at Carnegie Mellon, and the namesake is a guy named David Tepper. He was originally and still is in the hedge fund business, and he's a Pittsburgh native. He now owns the Carolina Panthers NFL team. And I remember seeing an interview where he said, it's good to be smart and it's good to be hardworking, but luck works 100% of the time. So it's better to be both of those things plus lucky, because luck will always 1,000% be the right answer. And so I was just lucky, to be pretty frank. I knew I wanted to be in banking. While I was in grad school, I started thinking about careers in banking, mostly because, and we talked about this a little bit before, I said, well, if I go work for a large financial institution, I know I want to eventually be an entrepreneur. I'm going to get exposed to all different types of entrepreneurs. So this is the path I want to go down. And I want the biggest and best bank that will hire me. Yep. And as fate would have it, Bank of America, this again was 2006 when I graduated from business school. Bank of America was recruiting, and it was for a rotational program. And the rotational program was supposed to go through a multitude of industries, but the start was real estate. So again, this is where the luck comes in. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in spring of 2006. you know what the market was like in spring of 2006. It could not have been hotter. We were at the top of the top, and we were so busy as a group. The group I got hired into in the first rotation was supposed to be a balance sheet lending group. So we mostly financed large apartments, offices, industrial distribution facilities, shopping centers. But because the group was so big and the market was so hot, I got a lot of experience right away on the 4 food groups. And I realized that I really enjoyed real estate because it didn't have me tied to a desk. Like, again, this is just, I mean, I could not have scripted this any better than the way it turned out. But in order to understand real estate, you have to be in the community. I got hired into the group, and the first rotation was with the real estate group in Southern California. My wife is from Southern California, so that was perfect. She was ecstatic that we were moving from gray, cold, rainy Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to L.A. And I love Pittsburgh. I still have many, many close friends who live in Pittsburgh. Actually, many of them still affiliated with the Steelers, my first NFL team. But I was new. You know, I'd been a pro football player, and I went almost right after that, took a brief internship, and then I went straight to business school. So I didn't know a lot about real estate at all. So I had to show up early, and I'm leaving late because everything took me longer just to get through, whether it was a lease abstract or reading a financial statement. All of it just required so much more focus for me that 6 months in, when I was scheduled to start thinking about the next rotation, the guy running the group, a mentor and now a good friend named Rick Nielsen, said, okay, we're so busy that we are thinking of hiring a new banker to join the team because we have that much business. But you look like you love it. You show up early, you leave late. And I said, well, I do love it. And I didn't share with him that I showed up early and left late because I was playing catch up. And he said, so if you don't want to finish the rotation, you can just stay in our group.
Yeah,
and I'll mentor you.
Why rotate, right?
And that was it. So that's a true story. After bouncing around on a bunch of teams and not having a ton of success as a pro football player, that was a huge win to basically get promoted out of the program early. I got to come home and tell my wife that I finally found a profession I think I was going to stick at, and that was it.
Good for you. Well, I mean, at Bank of America and J.P. Morgan, you worked on billions of dollars worth of real estate financing. What were some of the most important lessons that you kind of took from that?
Yeah, again, there's a bunch of factors that you can never necessarily predict. I mean, we know that just from being in the market. But you know, as high as we were in 2006, we were even lower by the time we got to the end of 2008. And that was as an industry, that was really as an economy.
Too big to fail.
That's right. and so you know it. You were working at a large institution at that time as well. But what that turned out to be was a great learning experience for me while on the job. So you're right. Bank of America and a handful of other institutions were literally deemed too big to fail. So even though we were all in crisis mode, our institution managed to stay afloat. And so it was just a great time for me to learn about
people.
That's right.
Well.
You remember
including Merrill Lynch.
Merrill Lynch, Countrywide was an institution we actually purchased right before the crash happened, and so I had to work through issues that became B of A's balance sheet issues, and that ultimately helped me learn a lot about structuring real estate deals. Just so we spent almost 2 full years in workout mode as a group, but that for me was a great way to learn the market because it's tough to learn when every deal looks good.
Yeah.
When the market's at the top.
Who was that guy at B of A who was everybody's best friend because he was in charge? They brought him in and he was the guy who was going to liquidate the stuff. Ken Lewis. Ken Lewis was the CEO at the time. No, there was a guy in Southern California that they brought in. I felt like he was the guy who was going to be handed all the REO stuff.
Oh, so and I'm blanking on the name too.
Yeah.
But I will tell you what actually transpired, and this is, the history books often get written after the fact by the winners.
Yep.
But what actually transpires, we did get a lot of those calls. A lot of those calls from, now it would be groups like Langdon Park Capital, reaching out proactively. Hi, Malcolm, Rick Nielsen, I want to help. Okay, how can you help? We got money. You got a bunch of bad assets that you want to get rid of. Can we buy those at 20 cents on the dollar?
Right.
That'll help. That's like, that's basically the analogy would be you get fired, you come home, and your next door neighbor knocks on your door and says, Steve, I want to help. Can I buy your car for 20 cents on the dollar? I know, right? I know you need money.
Never thought about that.
And
Thanks for the help.
yes, that's right. That's exactly right. We got a lot of those calls. But again, B of A and a handful of other institutions, Wells Fargo, were in the too big to fail category. So we didn't accept a lot of that help. You know, we ended up working through a lot of those deals. And the other good thing was that we had really high quality sponsors. So we lent money, even at the height of the market, we only lent to some of the best in class groups. And so they all found a way to get to the other side as well, not necessarily without some pain, but they ultimately made the bank whole, purchased their debt themselves, whatever they had to do to get to the other side. And so that was a great learning experience. So we didn't spend a lot of time, I didn't spend a lot of time on the let's fire sale the whole portfolio, which was turned out to be good because I was, as a banker, you then have to be shoulder to shoulder with that sponsor as they work through whatever the problem is. The building's not leasing. You got to month 18 in construction, and all of a sudden, not only is there no leasing happening, but the other bank that's in the construction loan wants out. And so how are we going to take on this entire loan ourselves? The sponsor has to put in more equity. What's the solution? That is a great way to learn as a now owner-operator myself what to do when things go sideways.
Fantastic. Yeah, for sure. Then what led you to JP Morgan, and when did that happen?
So again, this is one of the things about large institutions, especially large institutions that are really well run. The senior leaders tend to stay for a long time. And that's a good thing. If you are an investor, if you are a partner to those groups, you like the fact that senior leadership has a long tenure. They know how to get things done on your behalf inside the organization. But what it meant for somebody like me was that the senior folks in front of me who were really good and many of whom, believe it or not, are still at B of A some 20 years later, and they were there before I showed up.
Like Alan Staff, 39 years or something.
That's right. My dear friend Marshall Hilliard, who's been at the bank for close to 35 years. Sandeep Patel, who was an underwriter when I showed up and is now running the Los Angeles balance sheet lending group. Like, those people are really good and they don't leave, which is great. Again, if you are an investor, if you're a client, when you think about opportunities for growth, it's either you move to a new region, and I was and still am a father, and my kids were much younger and enjoying life in LA and in school. My wife was working as an attorney at a big law firm in LA, and her career was going great. So the opportunity was either, okay, B of A's headquarters is in Charlotte, North Carolina, so maybe think about moving to the Southeast. Maybe there's an opportunity in Northern California. So all these thoughts were going through my head around the time we came out of the GFC, Great Financial Crisis, and JP Morgan out of nowhere reached out and said, you know, we haven't been active in this space in Southern California. We're looking to build a team, and are you interested? I took the call, which turned out to be a really good decision, and ultimately joined JP Morgan as the lead coverage banker for their real estate group in SoCal. So that was it. It was a chance relatively early in my finance and real estate career to now lead a team, to call on some of the best clients in the market with a premier institution where I got to learn a ton. And so that was the progression, but I still have many friends who are at B of A, and I think fondly of the time I spent there.
Well, so everything's going so well with your big institutional career. Now you decided, let's change it up. Let's get into the entrepreneur lane. Talk about that.
This is where you get to have all the fun in our business. You know, as somebody who is not fully responsible for every part of a deal, but fully responsible for the outcome. Mm-hmm. This is where it's fun. There are literally no constraints as an entrepreneur, except your integrity and the amount of honesty that you bring to every transaction. But other than that, it's all blue sky. You can decide that this is the business plan, that business plan doesn't work. You can pivot because you haven't built out a huge infrastructure all around this particular business plan. You can decide this market's even better than we thought. Now you can deploy even more resources into that market. When you're at a larger institution, there's a playbook, and that playbook is often like handed down like the Ten Commandments, and you got to run that playbook regardless of what's happening, even with the plays that you're trying to run. And I will give a lot of credit to one of the best leaders in industry, period, and certainly one of the best leaders in finance. I didn't get to know him really well, but I got to know Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, while I was there, largely because, again, California is a big expansion market for that firm as a whole. Real estate was a relatively new platform in California. And frankly, and this is, just something Jamie would say himself if he were here with us, he was very focused on supporting Black leaders at the company, because he knew, one, it was the right thing to do. He also knew it was good for business to have a diverse set of leaders inside the company. So he took a very unique interest in my career. Whenever he would visit Southern California, and I sat on the market leadership team at JP Morgan, he would make it a point to pull me aside and ask in a way that I understood exactly what he was asking: how's it going? And it wasn't just how's the real estate portfolio going? It was, how is it going for you as a leader at our firm? So
that's incredible.
Very much so. And I really appreciated the insight and interest that he had in my career. It was incredibly helpful for me. But one of the other things that allowed me was just this freedom to reach out to him, because he always encouraged it, with new business ideas. And so in 2017, I did exactly that. So I'm still working at JP Morgan. I called him. He called me back 30 minutes later, and he said, okay, what do you want to talk about? I said, okay, we are super active as a firm in every major market across the country and a lot of major markets across the world. And in order for us to be active participants in these markets, the economies in those markets have to do well. Like, you can't have a retail branch if you don't have small businesses to support. You can't have a mortgage division if nobody's buying houses. You can't have a credit card business if there's no consumer who can actually pay your credit card bills on time. And if you think about what one of the biggest challenges is to these economies in places like New York, LA, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, it's the cost of housing. And we want to be, one, a good partner in these markets, but we also want to do a lot of good business in these markets. And Jamie, if it costs, this is my conversation with him, I said, if it costs more than half of your take-home pay to live in these cities, then you don't have anything left over to put into the bank. You certainly can't think about borrowing from the bank to start a new business. You can't borrow from the bank to go buy a new car. And so it behooves us, and it's also the right thing to do, to think about investing in affordable housing. Like, clearly, there's more demand than there is supply, but it also will have a really positive network effect on the economy as a whole, but certainly our business. And he said, sounds like a good idea. Come back to me in a week with a business plan. And Steve, I mean, I was excited, but I was very nervous, because now it was like, this is real.
Yeah.
This is real. And so I reached out to a few folks and did just that. And to his credit, he said, I like it even more. After we had the second call, he said, I like it even more. Now I want you to go work with the Community Development Banking Group inside of the firm that already lends to affordable housing developers, and figure out how we can allocate equity as a shop. So that was almost 2.5 years of really learning the ins and outs of
between 2017 and 2020 when you founded.
That's right.
Langdon.
And so doing that work on behalf of JP Morgan was, one, very fulfilling, but two, it was the best possible insight into kind of why there still is not enough affordable and workforce housing. And the one opportunity I discovered was that there are some best-in-class sponsors who do really good work in this space, but very few of them have cultural competency in the communities where workforce and affordable housing is needed the most.
They just parachute in
and it's hard to know why. I'll give you a very, very real example from a place where I grew up. So again, I'm from Northeast D.C., and I always remind people of that, because in my heart, that's who I am, and that's the city that made me. That's the neighborhood that made me. But I remember growing up in our neighborhood, we had a handful of businesses that we had to frequent. It's like the local carryout, which was a D.C. term for bodega. A lot of people in the neighborhood need to frequent these businesses, but there's like 6-inch plexiglass on the counter. So every time you walk into that carryout to go get your late night meal, you feel very much unwanted. And this is just a fact of life. And I could give you 15 examples like that. On the one hand, you understand why the plexiglass is there. Okay, the business owner may have some concerns about safety, but as the resident who lives in this neighborhood, it doesn't feel great to have to frequent and patronize a business that is literally so afraid of you as a consumer that they got 6 inches of plexiglass between the counter and the consumer that's keeping the business afloat. So that's one of the things when I say cultural competency. If you think about what might make a consumer love coming into your store, if you think about what might make the store safer overall, it's not 6 inches of plexiglass. Is this store bright? Is it clean? Is it safe? Does the person working behind the counter look like the person who's buying? All of those things make you feel a lot better about shopping in the store and a lot less likely to do harm to the person standing behind the plexiglass, and you don't need the plexiglass. So extrapolate that into housing. Like, think about every neighborhood, and we're here in Southern California, obviously, but whether we're talking about Newport Beach or Brentwood or the Crenshaw district, every neighborhood can be clean, right? Every neighborhood can be clean. Every neighborhood can be well lit. We live in Southern California. There are palm trees everywhere. So there's no reason that even if you don't have all the bells and whistles of a Newport Beach or Brentwood, there's no reason the neighborhood can't be clean and it can't be safe. So that's what I mean when I say cultural competency, thinking about how to own buildings and operate them in communities where just the dignity of an owner who knows what it's like to live in these neighborhoods has often been missing. That's what a lot of the big institutional sponsors lacked. So that was the lane that I thought we could really excel in, just asset management, how to build value in communities without having to do all the bells and whistles, just the basics that you really get by living there.
So Langdon Park was the neighborhood in Washington, D.C. where you grew up.
Absolutely.
Your firm is Langdon Park Capital. You kind of just touched on it. Now, how does that experience you had in that neighborhood and some of the sort of barriers and things that you saw that were not working very well, how does that sort of influence your mission for your firm, Langdon Park?
You know, every day. So one, I'm forced to think about, and this is a good thing, think about the neighborhood that raised me every day, because it did. You know, I grew up in the 80s and there used to be a term for what me and my brothers were, latchkey kids. So my parents.
I was one too.
Yeah. So so my parents both worked, and that meant we got out of school at 2:30, 3 o'clock every day. And because of sports and after school activities, we would generally be either at a practice, at the library, but we had 4 hours between the time school ended and my parents got home from work every single day. So on most days, we would go to either football, basketball practice, go to karate practice. There was a library right down the street. But whenever we finished with high school activities, we went down to Langdon Park. That was from age 9 to like 13, 14 when I got to high school. My everyday after school activity was at Langdon Park Rec Center, which was a basketball, 7 basketball courts, indoors. There was a basketball court. They had the ping pong table. They had arcade. There was a swimming pool there. There was a big picnic area. So that was like the flower bed. So we lived in a single family home that my parents owned, but there were public housing projects, which have since been knocked down to make way for luxury condos. Montana Terrace was 5 blocks away from Langdon Park. There was affordable housing, Brentwood and Saratoga. But we all shared this one amenity. And so when I think about the places where we invest, I think about those type of flower beds. Like, how can we create something that is the one shared amenity, and ours just happens to be housing, that can service a lot of the neighborhood. So that's what raised me. And you know, having to navigate that space at that time in Washington, D.C. also taught me a lot about how to move through the world. There was a lot going on at the park. But my brothers and I were there for really positive reasons. And also, this probably had a lot to do with my dad. Like, we managed to escape a lot of the negativity that went on at that park because people respected my father a lot.
Yeah,
a lot. And we were just, we were just kids
that
too.
sort of negative aspect was always there. But
Always there,
yeah.
but we rose above it. We focused on the things that we loved. I was a super nerd as a kid. I spent almost as much time at Woodbridge Library as I did at Langdon Park Rec Center. I don't know, do kids even go to libraries anymore now that we have Amazon?
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Why would they?
That's right. But I spent a lot of time at Woodbridge. I wore that library card out. And so I think about that community when I think about the places that we now invest in.
Yeah. Well, most firms they focus on profits for the most part. With your firm, I think it seems to me that you're emphasizing returns, but you're also emphasizing community impact. I know you're bringing in nonprofit groups to help maybe create that Langdon Park scenario.
That's right.
I mean, talk about how do you balance profits versus community impact? Talk about the nonprofit and how that works.
Yeah, so the first part, I'll start there. One, it's almost, I don't want to say impossible, it's very challenging if you are in our industry to not have returns and real market returns as part of what influences your mission. It's just tough to do it at scale if you don't in some way have a business plan that is self-sustaining. So, we have to focus on that part of our business as well, but we also think bigger picture. So it's not about squeezing out short-term profits, which again, in our business, the irony of our business is that in order to create long-term value for investors, the traditional method is usually a very short-term investment vehicle. So if you think about the typical life of a private equity fund is true in real estate, is true in just broader private equity, is anywhere from 3 to 10 years. And in a real estate investment, in a 36-month span, the one of the only ways to generate profits in 36 months is we got to find a way to increase rents. Mm-hmm. And increase in rents, in general, if you can also maintain whatever your operating expenses are, and in some cases decrease your operating expenses, that doesn't help with the bigger challenge of no supply for people who make up the broader part of these local economies. If I'm increasing rents, then I gotta somehow push out people who are the janitors, the teachers, the bus drivers, the first year employee at a large retail bank like BofA. Like, this is in LA where area median income is north of $100,000 a year. Like, you could have a very good job with benefits and 2 weeks of vacation every year and still not be able to afford to buy a single family home when those prices are north of $600,000 on average. So workforce is broadly defined when you're talking about submarkets like LA. So that's where the opportunity for an owner like us comes in. Mm-hmm. Thinking about a longer term hold, annual cash yield as opposed to IRR as a driver of returns is something that we talk about with investors all the time. Mm-hmm. Our buildings tend to stay.
Low beta.
That's right. They tend to stay well occupied in any cycle. Mm-hmm. There's strong demand for housing that is safe, clean, and relatively affordable. So that's where the return piece kind of plays. But to your point about how nonprofits can help augment our business, that very basic business thesis I just laid out, it works when interest rates are really low. Mm-hmm. If you can borrow really low, you can hold for longer, especially if you can borrow really low using agency financing, which is going to be 7 to 10 years anyway. You can make that business plan work. It's tougher if interest rates are closer to where they are right now. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about where either nonprofit partners can help, where public-private partnerships can help, and that usually means that manifests in things like tax abatements. So we can decrease our operating expenses by having either 100% or some of our taxes, property taxes abated, because we've got a nonprofit involved in the ownership structure. But doing that requires what I just described. You have to be very authentic about the mission. Nonprofit organizations tend to be, unlike the firms I just described and the pure for-profit world, they tend to be focused on mission only. So the only reason that they would agree to partner with a group like Langdon Park Capital is if we can say, and we're going to give you the opportunity to come to our property and implement resident services that help change the lives of people who live in this building. Mm-hmm. So those partnerships are very much a part of how we are able to generate those returns, and it doesn't have to be an either or. It should be an and ultimately, and this is outside of just the returns that you see on the balance sheet, you got positive returns for the entire community. If you've created something that's affordable and it's going to be affordable for a long period of time, now you get families who can afford to send their kids to the type of private high school that my brothers and I went to. You got families who can afford to send their kids to college. You got families who've set aside enough to go buy a food truck and start a business. Like, that's better for the overall economy if housing is affordable.
I love it. I love it. It just occurred to me. Have you ever met David Robinson?
So I know who he is, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm a huge basketball fan. I've not met him personally. I know you have a relationship with David and his prior businesses.
I did, because he was a partner with us at Phineas USAA, and he had a venture called the Admiral Fund, I believe, and his mission was like yours. Yes, we need to make a profit. Yes, we need to make returns that are commensurate to the risk, but we also are delivering a community impact beyond that. And they donated a certain amount of their profits back to the community that what they were investing in. So I'd love to introduce you to him sometime. He's a fantastic guy.
Absolutely. And, we have another connection. A couple of his sons were college athletes.
That's right, at Notre Dame.
One was a football player at Notre Dame, and a really good one at
Yes.
that. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, let's just touch a little bit. By the way, I love the mission at Langdon Park, and I'm if it can be scaled more and more, I'm a big cheerleader for it. It's a need that's so desperate.
That's right.
In every community, but especially in LA. My God, how do people do it?
Man.
They have no safety net because they spend so much money on rent, and I get it, but this transitioning into the kind of next subject of housing market, there's such a severe housing shortage, and powers that be can't seem to get out of their own way.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges, because in a state like California, and by the way, I was raised in a very progressive family. I'm named after Malcolm X. My younger brother is named after
I wondered about that.
Adam Clayton Powell. My youngest brother is named after Paul Laurence Dunbar. Like all great Black American leaders, and my parents did that with a lot of intentionality, because that's how they thought about what they wanted their sons to become as leaders in our community and this country. So what that ultimately leads to is just being very progressive in terms of politics and challenging the status quo, challenging the idea that equal rights also should mean equal economic opportunity. I'm a big proponent of all of that. In a state like California, which is also very progressive politically, I think one of the challenges is having the right balance between pro-business and pro-people. Like, they don't have, again, just like I was just describing, they don't have to be on opposite sides of the table. But when you think about some of the legislation in Los Angeles, let's just choose Los Angeles as one of the major cities in the world, not just California. And I'm a big supporter of Mayor Karen Bass, but she's a lifetime politician who has always thought about the people first. And I have the utmost respect for Mayor Bass and why she's made a lot of decisions that she has in terms of supporting certain legislation, particularly around affordable housing and how to create more of it. But having real business people at the table who've actually developed, who've actually gone out and raised capital for development, gone out and raised capital and return capital to investors for affordable housing should be a part of that legislation, because ultimately that part of the process determines whether or not you're going to have success with some of the legislation that's meant to ultimately protect those who need affordable housing. So to your point, and again, this is how it's manifested for us, because capital is really efficient, and the market is really efficient. There's a famous economist who we all studied in business school who talked about that. If development is expensive and challenging and tough to do in a city like LA, people just won't allocate any capital to do it. And so, like, I know there's demand, but it costs too much. We're not going to invest in it.
Too risky.
And our business can't afford to solve, I'm talking now about Langdon Park Capital, can't afford to try to solve the legislative challenges and tackle development all at the same time, which is why for the first 5 years of our existence, we focused instead on buying existing buildings and making those better.
Yeah.
Like that's been the quickest path for us to achieve this mission. I would love to be able to build big, shiny, brand new buildings that are also affordable, but right now it's often not feasible in our state and our city in particular.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but it is the crisis of our lifetime, the housing shortage, because I believe that it's sort of disenfranchising the young people. I think I heard the other day that the average age of the first-time home buyer is now 39 years old, something like that. It used to be 26. There's a big problem there.
Absolutely.
And I wish I could say I could see it being solved, but
that's right. So remind me, how old is your oldest, Steve?
Oldest is they just turned actually they turned 29 in 2 days.
Okay.
The twins, yeah.
So almost 30. If they didn't have the Ames family estate to support them
Yes.
in their first home purchase and starting a life, what would be feasible here in Southern California?
Nothing. Not even close.
And so my oldest is 22, recent college graduate, super smart, pre-med, doing a 2-year stint in the Peace Corps right now. But when my wife and I think about whether or not she would be able to, as a mid-20s Angelino, afford to live on her own in the city of Los Angeles, the answer is almost certainly absolutely not, if she were not our daughter. And so that's a challenge. That's a challenge, for sure.
Huge challenge. I mean, just high level, how do you see that playing out, and how could it get better?
You know, today we're at a real crossroads, and now I'm talking politically and socially in this country, but that also intersects with the economy. Mm-hmm. Like both of those things intersect with the economy. I think what we're about to find, and we've seen this with the recent mayoral election in New York City, like hypercapitalism is reaching an end. It's tough to imagine a successful economy where you've got a very small number of uber successful billionaires, a very large number of low-income earners, and a very small middle class. Mm-hmm. Like that economy doesn't work, and then what it leads to is we might as well elect a socialist as our mayor. We might as well elect a socialist as our governor. We should elect, and not that I'm completely anti-socialist, but I don't know that economic system is going to lead to long-term prosperity for everyone.
That's why I loved how you acknowledged that there's the people side, and yes, everybody loves stuff for free, and everybody wants everybody else to pay their bill. You acknowledge that it has to align with the business interests to make it work. There's got to be both.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, and I'll take it a step further and just to wrap it, because we're not obviously going to solve this challenge at this table, but one of the things we think about with our nonprofit partners, because ultimately our buildings, we want to keep them full, and rents do increase as operating expenses increase, probably at a lower rate than what the rest of the market is doing, but we do have to increase rents. Mm-hmm. But what that means is our residents have to be able to absorb those rent increases. So we like to think about nonprofit partners that can be very additive to the lives of the people who live in our buildings: financial literacy, access to job readiness training, access to job skills training. So those residents can be prepared to step into higher paying jobs, and so they can afford to absorb whatever rent increase. Even if we say we're not going to meet what the market is doing, the market is increasing rents by 10%, we're going to increase our rents by 7% because we can still make a profit there. Well, if your income has remained flat, even a 7% rent increase is too much for you to absorb. So we have to figure out how we can upskill people who would otherwise be locked out of economic opportunity. They have to go hand in hand. And it's a big challenge. We're doing it building by building. I would say, just as a finishing point, we welcome the opportunity to partner with really big groups who've got scale, but who understand that they need a partner with cultural competency, because they've got all the capital. Yeah. They may not have all the hands-on experience and the ideas, but we're very open to those sorts of partnerships, because it is without question one of the biggest challenges that our economy faces.
Well said. Let's transition as we kind of wrap up to career advice and leadership. Of course, this is the Chapman CRE webcast. We've got almost 30 graduate level students studying commercial real estate. Now, you've succeeded in 3 really competitive arenas: professional sports, investment banking, and now entrepreneurship. What sort of personal habits do you think were the biggest key to your success or so far that you could pass on to the students who might be listening?
So, and I'm still listening and learning myself, by the way, because this is going to be in one of the things I'm about to say. But first and foremost, and if it hasn't been clear, my parents were and remain one of the biggest influences in my life, period. But the house that my brother and I grew up in, you had to get up early. You got to get up early.
Our boys don't have that same.
Tell them come live with us for a week, and either they'll want to move out right away or they will adopt something that we've been doing forever. But getting up early, maintaining some level of physical fitness has always been a big part of my life. Mm-hmm. But getting up early allows you to do that and then still get your day in. So my dad was and is, thankfully he's still with us, a maniac about the physical fitness. So we had to, my brothers and I had to wake up at 5:30. This is when my dad was, 35, 40 years younger than he is now, and he was training for marathons. So he's got his 10 and 7-year-old sons jogging with him at 5:30 a.m. before we go to school. But it was early in the morning. You get something accomplished very early, and you have no excuse because it happened already. You already got that win on the board. And that is followed me in everything to this day. I'm up at 4:30. I'm at the gym at 5. That's, at this point in my life, like the only alone time I get is in the gym. Yeah. I can listen to whatever music I want to. I got 45 minutes of alone time, and it's also working on physical fitness. So getting up early is just, I don't know many successful people who would argue against waking up early.
I agree.
They kind of go hand in hand. But then the next one, this is super easy to remember, but you remember the movie Glengarry Glen Ross?
Sure.
Okay, Alec Baldwin and Kevin Spacey. Always be closing. Like
Always
that. That's
closing.
supposed to be the ABCs in our business, but I like ABL better. Always be listening. Always be learning.
I've always noticed that about you. You're observant, very thoughtful, and you listen.
Yeah, it's so to your students, this is one of the huge advantages that they have entering the business world or just the world in general as adults. Like, they've been a lot closer to academia very recently than the people that they'll work alongside, like me or like you, right? It's been 20 years since I sat in the classroom full time. So that means 20 years of advanced learning, the last 2.5 years of advanced artificial intelligence are now changing the way we work, changing the way we get information. So being willing to listen and learn constantly are big advantage, like create big advantages for yourself by being willing to listen and learn. And often I'm listening and learning from people who were very recently in school, because they got all the new knowledge. I got stuff from, I graduated from college in 1998. I graduated from business school in 2006. Yeah. The stuff that I learned is old, so always be listening, always be learning.
Right, especially with AI today. If you could sort of zone in on a couple of skills that would be most valuable over the next decade for graduate students, what would it be in business?
Wow, that's a good one. That is a really good one. I'd say there's going to be less of a focus, and your students probably know this already, on pure hardcore memorization and being able to model. In our business, like, modeling is the holy grail of being able to analyze a deal and ultimately decide if this transaction makes sense. But AI is creating ways to do that much more efficiently than somebody sitting at a spreadsheet. Even if you were really good at it, like, the prompts and the inputs matter a lot more than actually being able to build the model. But understanding and having the skill set to create partnerships, I don't think that can be replaced just yet by AI.
We focus on relationships a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where I've learned the most as an entrepreneur. The groups that invested with us at the outset, the groups that continue to invest with us, it's not because of how good our model looked. It's because of the relationship and how we continue to cultivate those relationships. So that's a really important skill set that should never be lost on people who can now get just about any answer, anything translated in seconds, anything reviewed in minutes. Like that's important, but it's no longer the most important skill set.
Right. We're actually developing at Chapman in the School of Real Estate a track. Ultimately, will be like a certificate in emotional intelligence, which is related to the relationship part of it. So much of your success in your career is about how you can work with people in groups and separate and otherwise. So that's going to be a differentiator for our program. We're going to actually have a leadership track focused on emotional intelligence and how that can carry you through your career.
That's right. So I'm just to bring it full circle. I know we're wrapping, but you started by asking about what I've learned from some of the coaches that I had back in my playing days. So I was fortunate because I got to play and ultimately work for teams with some of the best coaches like in history, from Notre Dame with Lou Holtz as a head coach. Also at Notre Dame, I got very early in his career a guy named Urban Meyer, who went on to coach several national championship teams at college level for two institutions. In the NFL, I got to play for Bill Cowher, who's an all-time great, obviously, at the NFL level. But they were all so good at connecting with players, and they did it in different ways. So that's another thing that students should know. You got to be yourself. You can't, as a leader, you can only be yourself. You can adapt strategies and maybe things that other really good leaders do, but you have to be yourself. And each of those people that I just named were very much different, but they were amazing at connecting with their staff, at connecting with the team, and they didn't treat everybody the exact same way, surprisingly. There were rules that we had to follow on each of the teams I played on, but not everybody got the same treatment. Some of that was based on how well you played. Yeah, like, let's be real. Like, some of it's based on can you get it done on Saturday or Sunday, but a lot of it is also based on the personality of the player. There's something to leading someone in the way that they're motivated to be led, and you got to figure that out. A really tough skill set to get, but a really important one for leaders today and in the future.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave our interview, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights today and coming all the way down from LA to contribute to our program. It means a lot. Your work really demonstrates to me, how commercial real estate can do both generation of returns, but also meaningful impact on communities. Very tangible. So I'm a big admirer. Thank you so much, and thank you all for watching the Chapman CRE webcast today. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're trying to bring relevant conversations, and I certainly believe this was a very relevant one. Thank you again.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it, my friend.
All right.